and I'm ready to talk about disabilities. So, anyone who wants to ask me questions, I will be very happy to try to answer them. I'm going to be smart tonight, and instead of going on my browser, I'm going to use my iPad to look up things. So, let me see if I can get on my Twitter from here. I may not be able to. Yes. Yes. Verifies me. Oh, it wants a fingerprint. Use the pen. Yes. Alrighty. Yay. Alright. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna la 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 la. Okay. Let's see if this will work. Ah. Okay, I am waiting for folks to come on and ask me questions. And in the meantime, I am going to look at Twitter. Let's see if I can. Oh, today is President Obama's birthday. Happy birthday, Prez. That's my Prez. I'm very pleased with his 2 terms in office. I wish that he was able to get more support from the Republicans, but that be that as it may. Okay, let's see. Well, I can't get into my Twitter or Facebook on this thing. This is not good. Let's just look at some news. Let's see if I can find any news on handicaps or disability. I should put disability. Yeah. Alrighty. Ooh, people with disabilities have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. CNN has an article there. That's from 2020, though. Let's see. July 24th, 2021, For the People Act, what it would mean for disabled veterans. Definitely, I keep my disabled veterans in my heart, too, because both my parents were veterans, World War II veterans. So, let's see. A study released February 4th, many doctors have negative perceptions of patients with disabilities. This is sad because, I have heard some accounts on YouTube of people from various with various kinds of disabilities that their families were fighting to keep them alive during the last wave of the pandemic when it was so bad. And a lot of them, because they were obviously disabled, um, it put them in a worse category. Now, I realize that hospitals and emergency room physicians, when they get absolutely swamped with COVID-19 patients, they have to make some very tough decisions, and often disabled people will come out on the short end of that stick. I don't like it, it's not right, but when you have limited resources and when you have, you know, literally life and death situations that are coming so fast that these poor medical people have to make a snap decision. And you can't blame them for kind of pushing elderly people and disabled people into the DNR heap. I I think it's sad, but it is a statement, a very stark statement of the inequities in healthcare. And it's it's horrible. Here's an article. I'm looking on CNN, by the way. They have a lot of good human interest pieces. I like their reporting very much. From March 28th of this year, they quote a person, "I spent a whole year indoors and upstairs." It's horrible. You know, there should be funding. So if you've got a disabled relative, you should not be having to put them upstairs. You should be able to move to a house that has a downstairs bedroom that they can use. That's just awful. Awful. And it is often cheaper just to get a new house that has the features you want rather than trying to remodel the old one. If you're building a new house, for example, it only costs about $250 to make modifications like putting a rail in the bathtub for a disabled person to hold on to, varying the level of cabinets and counters in the kitchen so that a person in a wheelchair could just, you've got a countertop and you've got a space under there you can roll your wheelchair under, or a chair, put a chair there so you can sit down and cook. There are, the other standard modifications is one flat entrance to the home and doorknobs, those little lever doorknobs that you can even open with an elbow. You don't have to grab and turn a doorknob to get in or out. And one doorway that is 36 inches wide. This is very important. And you might say, well, I don't have a disabled person in my house. Well, keep in mind that anybody who is physically active can break a leg. And you might be temporarily in the disabled boat. And a person on crutches, a person with a cane, a person with a walker, and a person with any kind of wheelchair, manual or electric, needs 36 inches on the sidewalk to be able to pass. I cannot tell you how many times when I was using a cane, because I've used all of these, when I was using a cane, I was very easy to lose my balance, and people would try to push past me on the sidewalk, and I was scared to death I was going to fall and break a hip. This is the number one way that a person gets in a nursing home, you see. broken hips is a ticket to the nursing home. So it was very, very difficult. And when I was using elbow crutches, I needed the same amount of room, and people didn't quite realize. I mean, with elbow crutches, a little more obvious that you need room on a sidewalk, but definitely when you are using a cane, you need just as much room on that sidewalk as um, any other handicapped person. And, a lot of people who use a cane don't think of themselves as handicapped, but handicaps come in all shapes and sizes. They can be physical, they can be mental. And it just means that life is just a little harder when you have a disability than it is when you don't. So, you young and healthy folks, think about, if you see a kid using elbow crutches or in a wheelchair, in a wheelchair, you're going to have to give them more room. But if they're using elbow crutches, they need just as much room as a wheelchair does. So, get on the grass, go around them, give them the sidewalk so they don't fall or their wheelchair doesn't fall over. One thing a lot of non-handicapped folks don't understand is that if you leave the sidewalk in your power chair, maybe your power chair is something like a Pride Mobility Jazzy like I had, that you can easily go around obstacles on the grass. If there is not loose gravel, if it's tightly packed gravel, you can handle it. If it is loose gravel, you are likely to get stuck. And if you get stuck, you can't lift your wheelchair because you're in a wheelchair, right? One time I had a loaner wheelchair from the nearest independent living center. Some of them have a warehouse with equipment that they can lend you, and thank goodness they had that. Because some doctors just don't want you to they don't want to write you a prescription for a wheelchair. And back then, it was pretty easy to get one from Medicaid. Now it is nearly impossible. My power chair quit, and, well, it didn't quit. The tires were so bald that I could not get up my ramp, and I had to give it up. I thought, well, I'll just get another one for Medicare. Well, my doctor told me that it was just about impossible, and she didn't want to, go through. There's a lot of work that a doctor has to do if you get an order for a wheelchair. It is an unbelievable burden of paperwork. This is wrong. It's punishing us disabled people for needing a wheelchair. So you just about have to be dying. I'm not dying. I don't have anything life-threatening, so I could be kicking for 20 years or more, but I can't get a power chair, which would enable me to enjoy walks outside without so much of a struggle. And it conserves my energy. I have very low energy, so it would be a boon to be able to have a power chair. And Medicaid said nope. And I went through the process, but the folks at the physical therapy place made me do all sorts of awful things that I don't usually do. And it was a rough process, and they told me that I was very unlikely to be able to get one. And my doctor flat out told me that under the current rules, I would not qualify. It's crazy. it adds so much to your quality of life to be able to have a power chair that raises and lowers. So when you are walking with a normal person in your power chair, you can raise it up and be at eye level with the person you're walking with. It makes a big difference. Um, Sorry about the interruption. I was just saying goodnight to my sister who's in the hospital with COVID-19 pneumonia. And I'm worried about her. It's tough. Um, I'm hoping that all of you have gotten your vaccinations, and if you haven't, I hope you are making your appointments now. Don't wait. Don't let it get that bad. So, okay, so, I could tell you about my first Sunday in a wheelchair. You know, everybody's so wonderful in my church. They're very kind and loving, and, we all call each other brother and sister. But yet, I got my wheelchair and I went. I went my first Sunday in the wheelchair, and I had been on elbow crutches, and it just wore me out to walk the halls at church. So I, I decided that I might as well just take the wheelchair. And people ignored me. They didn't know what to say to me. They really, some of my dearest friends that I talked to every Sunday just walked by me like I wasn't there. The difference between standing up and sitting is a huge one. I have had somebody wheel me around because at the time my daughter was 9 and it was very difficult for her to wheel me around on carpet. You don't realize that with a manual wheelchair, carpet is a huge barrier. If there are flat floors, then it's a lot easier to move a wheelchair around. You are on carpet and it is very hard, and she would get so tired. So she would have an easier time pushing me on the sidewalk than on the carpet at church. So I would get an adult to wheel me around, but they would wheel me up to the snack table and just leave me there. And then everybody would go in another room to talk, not realizing that I can't move myself. I am not strong enough to wheel my chair anywhere on carpet. And so I sat in the room the whole event by myself because the person who was pushing me forgot about me. So, and my daughter was off doing an activity, so of course she didn't know about my situation until she came to look for me, and here I am sitting in this room, and I had plenty of snacks, but I mean, I was facing the wall. I wasn't facing the window, so I couldn't look out the window, and I was just stuck there. It's an awful situation to be in. That's why I would much rather have a power chair, because then I can move myself around and I'm not stuck anywhere. People mean well, but they forget. They really don't realize how hard it is to be disabled. And, none of those people that left the room, they were looking for their friends, of course, and they didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but it really hurt my feelings bad. And, it's hard to live in a world where most people are healthy. So 4/5 of people are healthy and they don't have mobility disabilities. They may have other disabilities, but it's estimated that 1 of 5 people in the United States has a significant disability. And I hope they're counting mentally ill people in that figure, because absolutely mental illness is a barrier also. So, I had disabilities as a child. I couldn't keep up in PE. PE was just horrible for me. So it was very difficult to, be able to do anything. They had the President's Physical Fitness Program when I was in 6th grade. And I thought, oh, what a wonderful idea. I'll try out. Well, I looked at the list and my confidence just fell flat on the floor because all the things were really hard to do. I thought maybe I could do I think it was 50 sit-ups. I thought maybe I could do that. And maybe I could do the pull-ups, but the run walk, I thought, I can't do that. Well, I tried. I did get the 50 sit-ups. I could not finish the 50 pull-ups with the bar. And the 600-yard run walk, I remember, was particularly traumatic for me because we all did it, and most everybody in the class got the little medal thing for that. But I was next to last, and the girl that was last had to walk the entire way because she had heart problems. Now, that was just, both of us got left out because it wasn't based on improving your physical fitness. It was based on, you've got to do these fixed activities or you don't get the award. And there was no way I could compete with regular, healthy kids. I never had the high energy that my fellow kids, my friends had. I would get very out of breath easily. And I was living in the house with 3 smokers. Hey, it has effects. Secondhand smoke has bad effects on kids. And I was constantly getting bronchitis. When I moved out of the house when I was 18, I never had bronchitis again. I've had other respiratory things where I had to have antibiotics, but I've never had bronchitis. So definitely I was healthier after I left home. But when I was in junior high, it was not unusual for me to miss 30 days in a school year. And when I went to high school, it was 20 days, and that was a big hardship for me. I had to actually be on the homebound program in 10th grade because they thought that I might have a heart problem. I turned out not to have one, but it was so hard not having the ability to keep up with my peers was traumatic. It was very, very traumatic for me. So, I don't have anybody to chat with yet. So let me look at more news stories and see what I can talk about. Let's see. I'll take a look at this one. Paralyzed by a shooting, he now helps others with disabilities take control of their lives. Cool. So, they've got it titled CNN Heroes, Disabled but Not Really. I kind of am not sure what I think about that. You definitely have issues if you've got paralysis, you know. It's not a walk in the park. Even if you have good upper body strength, you got to consider that about 75% of people in wheelchairs are physically active males. And after they are paralyzed, yes, they're still going to do bodybuilding on the upper half. So they can definitely push their wheelchairs. They might be involved in wheelchair basketball. I mean, they might be able to do all sorts of stuff, and they might get offended if somebody offers them help to get something off the top shelf. They're going to get it or die, you know. So, it really hurts people like me who are in the 25% who are in the wheelchair for other reasons. I do not have a spinal injury and I can stand up for brief periods, but I get about 30 seconds before I'm really feeling like the pain is so bad, the shortness of breath is so bad, I feel like I'm going to pass out any minute. So I can't even stand up for the 2 minutes it takes to brush my teeth. So I have to brush my teeth in bed. So, you know, it is, you can't say disabled but not really. No, because there are all sorts of health problems that people with paralyzed limbs have to deal with that I don't. So it's not really, it doesn't give, um it's like somehow people without disabilities feel that if we can do something spectacular like help other people, volunteer or whatever, that somehow it mitigates the disability and we're living a normal life. No. And we tend to further that misconception by smiling, and even when we're in horrible pain, we say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." I am not fine. Let me tell you, I am not fine. But if I meet one of my friends on the street, those rare times that I am out, I say anytime I can be out is a good day, and I smile a lot. And so people don't really think I'm in a lot of pain because I smile a lot. But the reason I do this is because pain is a cruel master. The more you pay attention to pain, the worse it feels. Your perception of the pain is a lot worse. So I deal with my pain levels by distraction. So if I smile and act silly and joke around, it makes my day a lot easier. So that's how I cope. But it doesn't mean that I don't feel the pain, and it certainly doesn't mean that, disabled but not really. Come on. No, I don't like that at all. But, oh, disabled but not really. That is his nonprofit, so that's okay. He came up with the name, not CNN, so that's fine. That's cool. So, he's developed an 8-week fitness program, and before the pandemic hit, participants would meet for 1 hour group sessions twice a week, as well as nutrition seminars. Well, that is cool. So, okay, so, yeah, I mean, I think some people might take exception to the name of my live stream being GrannyHandicap too, but I'm glad that he can have a business and do all these things. It's wonderful when one of us can, like, yeah, it's very similar to, a lot of athletes have talent and they train for the Olympics, or they're being looked at by sports scouts, or, there's a lot of talent out there, but only a very few people get, to the major leagues or to the Olympics. It's not, and how do you think someone feels who goes to the Olympics and comes home without a medal? There are a lot of them every year, and it must be devastating because just to get to the Olympics is a big deal. But if you don't come home with the medal, people probably just brush it off as, you didn't try hard enough. Of course they tried hard enough. They tried their very, very best, of course. But, most of us are not Olympians. Generally, just talking about normal people, most of us are not Olympic material. Okay, we do well to jog around the block. All right, so if you've got a disabled person like this guy that made Disabled but Not Really, that's like going to the Olympics. That is exceptional, and I applaud him. That's wonderful. But don't hold me to the same standard. I have run into other people with disabilities that are like, well, oh, hi. I've got, okay, I'm having trouble reading this. Murray? Is that right? Murray 50? Hello. Do you have any questions for me? And I'll keep talking while he's typing or not. If you want to ask a question, that's great. If you are just listening, then that's fine too. Good to have you with me. So, what was I saying? Muzzy, that's right. Okay. So what was I saying? That, some people can go to the Olympics and some can't. And some people can do a lot of physical therapy and get out of a wheelchair. And that I say that's great. If you can do that, you can. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful that your nephew has has you, because it's so important to have somebody in your court when you're disabled. I want to raise awareness, and I want to build a community here where people feel safe. And if you want to invite your nephew, if it's okay with his parents, he can come on here too. And if he has questions, I would be glad to try to get some answers. Because what I want to do is pull this community together to support each other, because it is hard to be disabled. And life can be happy no matter how disabled you are, It's just a matter of keeping that positive attitude and just making sure that you are taking care of yourself because, I've heard a lot of handicapped people tell me that, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm already disabled. What's a little more disability? And no, 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 no. You need to watch your health and take care of yourself because things can be worse. And the better you take care of yourself, then the better it is all around. And when you build that can-do list, that's the important thing because you've got your can-do list is about like this, and your can't-do list is about like this. And that does awful things to your self-esteem. So, it's good to pay attention to what you can do, and it's good not to be pushed to do things that you're not ready for. My doctors constantly tell me I need to exercise more, I need to lose weight, and I'm trying to do those things. But my bad days far outnumber my good days, so it's really difficult to do that. I do the best I can, and the exercise I can tolerate, is like I stretch in bed, I'll do arm circles, I'll raise my legs up and pull my toes towards my shins, and I lift them up as high as I can, and then I slowly lower them. I'm doing it right now. And that is to prevent me getting a blood clot in my legs, which I did, and I had to be in the hospital a week, and it was very hairy. So, yeah, it's good to listen to doctors and medical professionals because they know what happens when you are inactive and when you have a mobility disability or, anything going on where it's hard to get up and move. Then it's important to move as much as you can. So, especially when I'm gaming, I do this number and I do this number and just exercise my hands and rotate my thumbs and rotate my wrists and rotate my forearms and rotate my everything. And that way it keeps me from doing, it kind of mitigates the repetitive motion of gaming. So, Muzzy, do you have any questions for me about, or do you want to tell me how your nephew or niece copes with his or her disability? And if you want to, that's fine. And if you don't, I'll just keep talking. But the best thing about my channel is the people that talk to me. So, and thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. I am trying to get more followers so that I can build my community, and it means a lot to be followed. Thank you. And if you don't have any questions, I'll just keep talking and let me know if I'm talking about what you want me to talk about, or if you want me to talk about something else, I'm happy to do that. It's it's rough to be disabled, but there are also great blessings. You have to look at what is going well in your life. You can't just let the negative pull you down, because it's as I've been talking about, when you're a kid and you're trying to keep up with normal kids and you can't. There's a lot of things that go on with your self-esteem around that, And I was not diagnosed with anything until 8th grade when my doctor just said I had arthritis in my knees. And I was taking 5 aspirins 5 times a day, and it got to where my ears rang, and I still have the tinnitus from that. um, he did the best he could, but it was unusual for a kid my age to have arthritis. And, I was talking to all these people who were applying for cheerleading, and they were saying, "Oh, you should do this too." And they were so sweet about it. And I said, "There's no way I can do that. I couldn't do all the exercise that y'all have to do to build your muscles up." And so it was kind of hard, to not have dreams of playing sports or anything like that. Of course, I knew a lot of kids who weren't into sports, but the crowd I wanted to run with was, playing basketball, and they were going and doing games. So what I did was I found that I could go on the school bus to the away games for really cheap. And Mama said, "Oh, 50 cents, I can give you that." So I would go to the away games and had a blast just watching them play. So it was really neat that I got into that. And that was one thing that, if I couldn't play, at least I could go and watch. And I'd see a lot of my friends there. So it, there are ways to compensate. It's not as good. If your favorite flavor is caramel cashew and all they have is vanilla, you still like ice cream, right? So, you know, it's kind of that sort of thing. But I think being disabled, I appreciate things more than some of my normal counterparts, especially in school. If something good happened, it meant so much because I had a lot of crummy days. And just I think that definitely when you're going through stuff, you have a greater appreciation of what happiness is because the contrast is there between the bad stuff and the good stuff. It's big. So I Mama was a very positive person. She always told me that, you can do whatever you want if you dare to dream. And so I dared to dream. I had a lot of big dreams that I wasn't able to do, but at least I had them and worked towards them. And Mama's positive attitude really, really helped me because she did extraordinary things. She was very good she never met a stranger. I was kind of shy. It was hard for me to speak up and say hi to somebody. I mean, I'd have to gear up for like 5 minutes to say hello to somebody. I was that shy. You would never know it. I'm still that way. It takes me a little bit to get to talking to people, but I've gotten used to just going ahead, and I've had good experiences from just talking to people and just saying hi or smiling. And I usually let other people do most of the talking, and people love to talk once somebody's listening. So it's been, you know, a good experience interacting with folks and interacting with people even that I don't know. So it's um it brightens their day and it brightens my day. So mutually beneficial. So but the best thing that you can do for your niece or nephew is listen to what they have to say. And if they're having a down day, listen to them. It takes strength to listen to somebody who is actively, they're really down and they're complaining and things are so hard. But if you listen to them for a little bit, and then maybe you can add some things like, what do you want to do that would be fun, even though you're feeling crummy today? What would help you be able to cope with it? And maybe you can, you know, little things please children. They're very easy to please. Sometimes just, maybe they can watch you do something if it won't make them feel worse. You have to know your dear one and what can act as a trigger to lift their mood. But it's nice to listen when they don't feel good, because you don't want them to learn that the only way they can get attention is by smiling and acting happy and like everything's great when it's not. You want them to be honest when they feel bad, so that if it's something that needs to, maybe mom needs to take them to the doctor, because you get used to, I used to work at Georgia Retardation Center, and those poor kids, they were all the time going in for surgeries, or they were um, getting sick, and a lot sicker than a normal child would, and having to be in the hospital, in and out of the hospital that was on campus. And I had no idea that handicapped people, went through so much. I, on the other hand, had never had a surgery. I had had constant pain all my life, and eventually got diagnosed with fibromyalgia and a bunch of other stuff. But when I was in my 20s, I was trying to do exercises when it was night and the students were sleeping. And we'd go every 2 hours and check and see if anybody needed a diaper change. But we were just sitting out in the halls talking for a lot of those nights, that when we weren't needed to do anything, we were just, and one of the girls thought, well, this is a chance for us to get in shape. We could do some exercises quietly while we're, and I tried that, and I almost had to be out of work. It was bad. I had to finally tell him, no, I can't do this. This is too much for me. But, you know, I used to tag around with all of the therapists. We had a music therapist, we had an art therapist, we had occupational therapists that would come and work with the various girls and boys. And I really enjoyed learning about what they were doing. And there were some things that a staff like me, I didn't have a degree, I wasn't a professional, I was just a health services technician. So I would help them get baths and feed them if they needed it, and make sure their diapers were changed and things like that. I worked with the profoundly retarded. So some kids were rather heavy, and we had to get two people to lift them. And, you know, we had to be very careful not to hurt them, and, to help them with little activities. There were a lot of little things that we could do during the day that when they were awake, playing with them with toys and helping them to play with toys, was a lot of the focus of the things that we could do that the therapists were doing. The music therapist taught us some little songs about body parts, so we'd We'd lift up and say, "This is your hand. It is a part of you. This is your hand. It is part of you." You know, just different things, eyes, noses, mouths, and stuff. And we really had a lot of fun doing that. And I wasn't the only health services technician doing that. A lot of the others were. And it just, you know, a lot of times the kids would laugh when you'd start that. And, you know, there were some that couldn't respond to us, and that's always hard. But just being able to be with them and do these activities with them, I felt very close to all of them. And they all had their little personalities. My main problem, and one of the reasons that I quit over there, was I was really getting depressed when I saw how few visits I got from parents. This was 1980. Still at that time, when a kid was institutionalized, a lot of doctors were saying, "Oh, it's just better if you don't visit, it just upsets you." And the thing was, we were with these kids every day, except when we were off, and we alternated weekend days. So sometimes we would have days off during the week, and sometimes we would have weekend days off. So we were with these kids 5 days a week. We could tell when a parent came in for a yearly visit, we could see the change in even the most profoundly retarded child's eyes. We could see that they recognized their parents, and the parents couldn't see it because they didn't come very often. And I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if they lived far away and maybe they couldn't make the trip but once a year, but it was so heartbreaking to see this, that the child recognized them, and here they are thinking that the child doesn't recognize them at all. So there were a lot of things that really got to me, that, most of the parents stayed away and didn't come. And one child was in the other side of the cottage I worked because she herself had heart problems, and her health got too bad for her to take care of her daughter. And her daughter was getting bigger and heavier, and she had cerebral palsy, so she had to have help with everything. If they had only had a program like they do now, where you can have a caregiver come in the home and you don't have to have them go into an institution. And of course, they closed all the institutions, and I think that, caused a lot of other problems. But, children always, no matter how disabled they always know when someone loves them. And they do respond. It can be hard to see that response if you're not around often enough. So I hope that helps someone to know that it does make a difference. It makes a big difference. So let's see, what else can I talk about? I could talk about inclusion and public school system. I have a lot to say about that. I raised two girls with ADD. That was, now they call it ADHD, no matter what. Attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity. My girls were not hyperactive, but they were very disabled where the attention span was. And my older daughter other students were complaining about how much stuff she had on the floor around her desk. It was really bad. And the teacher was like, "You've got to teach her how to pick up after herself." And I tried. Oh, I tried. I went, this was in the very early days of the internet in the early 90s, where you could go on, they had, at Micro Center, they would have a list of computers that you could dial into, and they had what was called gophers. This was before you had pictures on the internet. So you would have a menu with A, B, C, or D, and whatever, and then you'd go into that menu, and then there'd be A, B, C, or D. So you could get into these forums where you could discuss things. And so I would go on the Gophers and look up things on attention deficit disorder and find information. And I would try techniques, this and that, and see if I could get her a little more organized. Because, with attention deficit disorder, one side of that is you might consider medication to help the child have a longer attention span. The other side of that is the behavioral training. You have to teach them good habits, because some of the coping mechanisms that they acquire because of the attention deficit can be harmful to their mental health. So you teach them to write down goals and organize their papers in folders by subject and keep them organized in there, and have a division in their notebooks for each subject, and teach them to put those notes under the right subject, and that way then they know where all their homework is and they know what to turn in. My younger daughter never got her homework turned in. I know that we did a lot of assignments together 5 and 6 times, because I was seeing these same papers, and it's like, what? That's not getting turned in? And I couldn't be there with her to make sure that she took the papers out of her backpack and put them in the bin. And I would check her backpack and it would not have the papers. So I was assuming that they were getting put in the right place, but apparently she was getting distracted and putting them someplace else, and she wasn't getting credit for them. And I would go and talk to her teacher and tell her, I'm trying this, this, and this, and she says, that's great, but I'm not getting the work. So I finally, in 4th grade, I said, when I got disabled, that's when I started homeschooling my younger one. We got along really well. I was able to, pretty much go through all her subjects in an hour. They take, 6 hours in school, but it's mostly the kid is sitting there with their hand raised, waiting for the teacher to come to them. We have classes that are way too big. She had 30 students in her class, and there just wasn't enough teacher to go around, and they didn't have a teacher aide. So I had a lot of frustration with the schools. With my older one, I really pushed for the school to give my older one some help. She needed help with her homework, and they teach all these new methods. County school systems, I don't know if it's that way where you live, but they go after this experimental method and they think it's great. And then a couple of years later, there's another experimental method and they're switching everything over to that. And it's on and on and on. Parents cannot teach the kids what they learned in school because they learned a different method. And it's especially that way with math. I learned to do it one way. My parents knew another way, and they couldn't help me because I was supposed to do it this way, these steps, and it's nuts. They should stick to methods that they should standardize these methods among all schools so that you've got the same things going on and, not be switching back and forth every couple of years because you don't finish the whole curriculum in one thing before you're learning a completely different method and having to start all over again. So, I had a lot better time doing homeschool 1-to-1. We lived in Utah then. They have a thing called the core curriculum. All states have a core curriculum. The one in Georgia is written simply, so a parent who is homeschooling, at least back in the 90s, it was written that way, where it was easy to understand. The goals were very specific. It was very easy to do homeschool in Georgia, but I didn't live in Georgia. I lived in Utah. You pretty much needed a specialist of education degree to understand their core curriculum. So I used to go to the Georgia website and look at the Georgia one and compare the goals, and they were basically the same, but Georgia spelled it out, and Utah just expected you to be a genius. So definitely, I had a lot of problems doing homeschool because I'm college educated, and you only need a high school education. But I thought about, somebody with just a high school education, how in the world are they going to understand the Utah core curriculum? Crazy. So definitely, I would have appreciated something like California later instituted, where they actually had a whole program for homeschool that you could just log in with your child and do the activities and get the credits in. So, but at the time, Utah didn't have that. Georgia didn't have that. California was about the only state that had that. But I would look at that and say, oh, if only they had that here. Um, but I found a lot of things to help me on PBS because they had a lot of the programs they used in California, the Teams program, which was very, very good. The films that they had on all the subjects were very interesting, and they were like documentaries, but at a kid's level. And NASA had a lot of good things about the math and science. So Maggie and I would watch things together and then do some of the activities. Some of the things in the NASA materials were way over my head. So it was hard for us to get the materials and do the things, but most of them use simple materials, and the homeschool experience was wonderful, and especially since Maggie had the problems concentrating and also had a lot of health problems. The attendance thing was very, very hard for her. And I'm sure that a lot of parents struggle with that when you have a handicapped child, um, because a lot of them tend to get sick more often. Now, as for me and my daughter, it took COVID coming out, and they did studies on people's immune systems according to blood type, and they actually found that if you have A or B blood type, then your immune system is lower than a person with O or AB. And I think they've kind of done more research, and they've done some different things about that. So what I'm quoting may not be accurate now, but definitely the blood type thing. That explains why I was out of work so much and why Maggie was out of school so much, because of our blood type. So I'm hoping that schools will incorporate some procedures and allow disabled people to be able to be out when they're sick. I got a lot of sickness because people at school were going to school sick because of the attendance thing. A lot of people at work were going to work sick because of the attendance thing, and I was catching it all and being out a lot. And we have a long way to go as far as making life fair for disabled people in school and at work. So, well, if nobody has any more questions, let me go back to the news and see what else I can find to talk about. Let's see. Let's talk about economic impact of disability for a little bit, if you want to get into this. Okay, here's an interesting article. This is on the National Bureau of Economic Research and the Bulletin on Aging and Health, and this is March 2013, the prevalence and economic consequences of disability. Okay. So this is about the U.S. disability insurance program serving an ever-increasing number of beneficiaries. And having been through that mill, Social Security disability is very hard to get. I was applying for it when I was still working because I could see the end coming. It's like a train wreck getting ready to happen. I'm having all these problems with the attendance. They created a job for me that was 30 hours a week at the library at University of Utah. And I was having trouble even keeping my absences low enough for 30 hours a week. I rearranged my schedule so I worked a little longer and had a day off at the end of the week. I thought maybe having a 3-day weekend every week would help me to be there, and it didn't help as much as I hoped it would. So I could see the writing on the wall that I was getting disabled, and I was 40, which it's extremely hard to get disability if you're a young person than if you're older, like I'm 62 now. So getting disability in your 60s is probably a lot easier than trying to get it if you're a young person and you don't appear disabled. And that is where I was. So, they did some research here to design an optimal disability insurance system, since they were projecting that the Disability Insurance Trust Fund was going to be exhausted by 2016. So I haven't heard anything about that, and I've supposedly been watching the subject. So, wow. Because Congress decided to spend the money that was set aside for Social Security to take care of the deficit. Now, the deficit is bigger than ever, and the Republican administration that just was in office spent more than the Democratic administration that's in now is spending. So it's like, okay, so they used over 40 years of data, and they looked at lifetime disability risk. They looked at changes in earnings, income, public transfer receipt, poverty, work, food consumption, and housing consumption that follow disability. So they were trying to get a picture of the well-being of the disabled. And they they explore how the effects of disability vary with the severity and duration of the disability. And respondents are characterized as disabled if they report they have any physical or nervous condition that limits the amount of work you can do. That's a quote. A first key finding is that disability rates are high. A 50-year-old male household head has 36% chance of having been disabled at least once during his working years. By age 50, nearly 1 in 10, that's 9% of men, have begun a spell of disability that is both chronic, lasting at least 4 years, and severe, greatly limiting or eliminating the ability to work. Wow. These odds rise to 1 in 4 by age 60. And then they show that disability is associated with bad economic outcomes. 10 years after onset, respondents with a chronic and severe disability have, on average, experienced a 79% drop in earnings. I can vouch for that. A 35% drop in after-tax income, and a 22% drop in food consumption. Because, when you're low income, food is one of the first things you cut. You cut out snacks and frills and oh, yeah. 2/3 of this group never returns to work. The declines in income and consumption for the chronically and severely disabled group are more than twice as large as those experienced by average disabled individuals. Wow. One-sixth of families with a chronically and severely disabled household head fall below the poverty line in the long run, even after accounting for the value of in-kind transfers and the underreporting of benefits. So consumption begins to fall prior to the reported onset of disability. So indicating that future disability status is somewhat imperfectly predictable in the short run. I can vouch for that. I knew for years that I was going to get to the point that I could not work. So paid off my school loans, got rid of my car, all sorts of stuff. I systematically went, okay, I'm gonna exhaust every possibility before I apply for disability. And you can't get Medicaid if you don't have Social Security disability or some sort of disability through the workplace. So I did not have proof of that. I had to go to doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment, and these were paid for. However, I've heard from several people who have gone through applying for disability in recent years. The government doesn't pay for those visits anymore. You have to pay them out of pocket, which I see as horribly, horribly unfair. So the study concludes, the authors conclude that there are many important questions remaining for future research. And very interesting article. I'll put a link to it. Let's see. Well, if I'm going to put a link to it, I'm going to have to look it up on this machine. So bear with me. I'm going to switch screens. You won't see it. You'll still see me. But I'm going to go look up this article and put the link to it because it is very interesting. So that's... Okay. And here's my link. And I'll come back to Twitch and put it right here. There we go. Prevalence and economic consequences of disability. And that is at nber.org. So there we go. So if that's of interest to y'all, then there it is. So, getting disability is a thing because I've known people who were disabled as children and they got SSI. SSI and SSDI are the two main programs that Social Security has for disabled people. SSI is for people who have never worked, like children, or if they've been too disabled to ever hold a job. And what they get for a pension is very much smaller than SSDI gives you. Social Security disability insurance looks at your highest ever paying job. Mine was $20,000 a year in 1990. That was the year I was a computer operator at Georgia Tech Library, and I got a raise to 7 something an hour, which for me was a lot of money, but it really wasn't compared to what I could make in private industry. But working for the state gave me great health benefits, which I desperately needed. So I put up with the low pay to be able to get the benefit package. And because the state of Georgia considered all its state employees as one big group to bid on insurance, I had a choice of 6 insurance plans in 1988 when I started working at that library. So it had a great advantage because me, as a person with ADD, I like to jump around from job to job, or I needed to because of the physical demands. So in the library, I could jump around every 6 months without penalty. So I took advantage of that. And, although I I loved working in the reference department. I really enjoyed that. But there was not, well, I worked at Georgia State University and Georgia Tech. I worked at Georgia Tech as a computer operator in the systems department in the library. And that was very technical. I was lifting computers, I was installing computers, I was troubleshooting the accounting software on the fourth floor where administration was. I was tracing down network problems. I was volunteering on the, I was doing that at Georgia State when I was helping customers, patrons of the library, with searches in the databases. That was later on. So as a computer professional, I was also learning C. I was consulting with the programmers when we needed changes in the reports in circulation. I was running reports from home every morning before I left for work. So by the time that I got to work, the reports were always already printed out and I would deliver them to the various departments. So there was a lot to that job, and there was troubleshooting of printers, there was troubleshooting of computer problems, and dealing with somebody that, maybe was using this software and they loved it, and then the state changed the software that the whole library was having to use, and sometimes there'd be a little friction there. People get used to one software and they don't want to be using another. So yeah, it was a lot of crawling under desks, getting in positions that were very painful for me, bending over the backs of terminals, tracing down wires, um, lifting computer monitors that could weigh 25 pounds, lifting computers that weighed about 50 pounds. So, yeah, it was very, very physical. And we were busy. We went from a 6-man department. We had one girl that re-injured her diaphragm from a cheerleading injury, and she had to quit her job. So we're down to 5 people. We had a Mac person who was planning to leave when I first started. Well, he left, so he was the first one to leave. So that left 4 of us. Then we had another lady who was doing the software on the 4th floor, the accounting software, and helping with that sort of thing. And she had a husband in the military. He got transferred, so then she was gone. And we were down to 3 people. It was very, very difficult to do the work of 6 people. And I was the one who, when I was in the office, I was answering phones, but at any time I might get a call from somebody on whatever floor saying, oh, my printer's jammed, or oh, my computer went dead, I don't know what's wrong with it. So I would have to go and troubleshoot that, and it was just bang, bang, bang. When I was pregnant with my younger daughter, I would go all day, and I had to get my lunch in before I left, right? OSHA rules. So, I would maybe be going downstairs to the break room at 4:30 before I left at 5, getting my lunch break in. And, when you're pregnant, you get very hungry. And it was just a madhouse every day. It was a lot of stress, but it was a lot of fun because it was always something different. So it was very neat for me to get all that experience in all these different computing areas. And I thought, boy, this will be good for my career. I'm getting all this experience. Well, then I had a problem pregnancy. And so Friday, I was leaving work. I was excited because we were going to the Renaissance Festival that Sunday. And so then we go to the Renaissance Festival and I get sick. And then I go to the obstetrician on Monday and she says, you cannot work. You have to stop working and you can maybe go to the store and spend 15 minutes, no more. I mean, I'm talking the 15th minute, you have to get out of there, even if you haven't paid for your stuff. You have to just leave your cart and go because this is serious. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So for 6 months, I have a pregnancy that I could lose any day with something serious called placenta previa, which means that the little when a baby's in the womb, there's this big organ called the placenta that feeds the baby. So basically, it's the go-between between your oxygen, your nutrition, everything you eat, and all the nutrition goes to the baby through the umbilical cord because of the placenta. But if the placenta is placed too low in the uterus, which is the baby box, then it can make you bleed to death because it has a hefty blood supply. So it can kill you and the baby just quickly. You could die before the ambulance can get there. So I am very unusual in which I've had this twice with 2 different pregnancies. I mean, it's the odds against that are astronomical. But I'm living proof that it can happen once in a blue moon. I was scared to death my whole pregnancy. I would do a little sign saying so many weeks, and every week I would have my husband take a picture of me, to kind of celebrate, yay, we made it through another week. And we eventually got to the time for Maggie to be born. I mean, when we passed 28 weeks and she could survive outside of the womb, we were like pumped. And when she did come, she was only 2 weeks early, which is, that's fine. It didn't require any extra measures, but she came in 45 minutes, which is extremely dangerous and unusual. So, yeah, that was an adventure, but I've got my daughter Maggie. She's 30 now and very, she was a healthy baby. She, just she has the B positive blood like me, so we catch everything, but at least she wasn't born with any significant disabilities, which I was worried about. And I was 30 when I had her. So, 30, you're kind of getting on the borderline there where you can have more medical problems and the baby can have genetic problems. But she didn't have any genetic problems. I was so grateful to the Lord for taking us through that. But, it but she did have the attention deficit disorder as a child, and it was pretty severe. For attention deficit disorder, there is a set of 30 symptoms. It's divided into 3 parts. It's divided into auditory, then visual, then kinetic symptoms. So kinetic is motion, so that's where you get into hyperactivity. Neither of my girls had hyperactivity, but the auditory processing problems, they both had severe problems there. In other words, I would go out the door and holler their names and say, "Come home now," and get no response. I would have to walk all over the neighborhood looking for them to see where they were. And, this would happen quickly because I was watching them. I was, checking on them every once in a while. And especially with my older one, I never knew at whose house she was going to be. So I would have to walk all over the neighborhood, knock on doors, and say, "Is she here?" And I would walk to the house rather than call because I figured while I'm walking there, I can be looking around and seeing if I see her bicycle. With Maggie, with my younger one, it was more difficult because she didn't have a bike. She never learned to ride one. So basically, we had a three-wheeler, and I would put her in the basket and I would drive it. We'd get groceries that way. It helped since we didn't have a car. But she never got the balance to ride a bike. And so, and I wasn't really able to hold her up like I did with Mandy. Mandy was able to ride a bike and she rode it everywhere. Once she learned how, she just took off. But, it was those 30 symptoms, any of them by themselves, if the kid does this, it's not necessarily meaning that they have attention deficit disorder. I filled out a questionnaire, the doctor filled out a questionnaire, and her teacher filled out a questionnaire. And then the doctor looked at the answers from all these questions and determined which areas that she was doing these behaviors more than half the time. And that's the standard by which they diagnose attention deficit disorder. So, a lot of kids have attention deficit disorder. But you also have a lot of teachers saying, "Oh, your kid has ADD, they need medication." And it's like, whoa there, teacher. You're not a doctor, you're not diagnosing this kid, and you can't demand that they get put on medication just because they are disruptive in your classroom. There is a process. So, I got a lot of that from both my daughter's teachers. But, I listened to my doctor because he's the one with the training to recognize this, and we discussed medication. My older one decided that it was too hard. All the attention on her taking medicine at school, it got to her, and she just wanted to quit. And I let her quit her medication. And so we tried several different ones, and none of them really worked that well for her. Cylert worked really well. And she was on Cylert for several years, but then she finally got to where she just didn't want to take anything at school, especially when you get to middle school and things are a lot harder psychologically for kids when they hit that middle school age, because especially for girls and boys. I can't really speak to what boys go through because I had two girls. But I've heard from people that have boys that they also have problems in middle school. It's an awkward age. They have trouble maintaining relationships. A lot of times kids are just absolutely mean, and they can have so much stress from, everything. I was horrified to find that with my older one, They were giving them 15 minutes to snarf down lunch. This is just cruel. And no wonder kids act out, because you treat them like animals, they're going to act like animals. I really believe that they should reform all public schools. They should have at least an hour for lunch. They need to be able to socialize at lunch. And to rush them through their food, we have a lot of fat kids now because we're giving them so much homework. They're not getting the exercise they need because they can't finish their homework before it's bedtime. They stop for supper, but I mean, come on, this is just crazy, the things that we ask our school kids to do. When I was in school in 6th grade, I had an hour for lunch. I had so little homework, I could finish all 6 subjects in 30 minutes. Contrast that to my poor younger daughter, who had so much homework to do every night. We would walk home from school, because I'd walk up and pick her up. I thought it would be good for my fibromyalgia. Turned out that it really got to me after a while, and I couldn't do as much. But we would start with the homework. The moment she got home, I'd give her a snack, and then we would start in the homework. Then we would break and have supper. And then we were back at the homework until 9 o'clock at night, when she had to go to bed. And she wasn't finished. It was horrible. She didn't have time during the day to go out and play and meet with her friends and do stuff. And I think it's a similar situation for most parents nowadays. They have so much homework, they don't have time to be social. And no wonder kids act out when they're at school. The other thing is, school psychologists are not clinical psychologists. They are psychometrists. They give tests. And tests in school are unfair to anybody who's a member of an ethnic group. If you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you can probably sail through the tests. If you are black, if you are Hispanic, if you are an immigrant, you're going to have problems with these standardized tests. It's ridiculous. They need to quit testing these kids to death, because a lot of kids have test anxiety. I suffered a lot from it. I would know the material. I was a very good student and I studied hard. But tests, I was always the last person to turn in my paper, and I was sometimes not all the way finished, and the anxiety would be through the roof. And it was very hard to concentrate on my paper. And I always, since I was a good student, I always had people wanting to copy off my paper. That stressed me out. So, lots of stuff. They really need to change the way that they teach kids. They need to just have less testing. There are other ways to find out that they know the stuff without making them do all of this constant testing. It just raises their anxiety and lowers their self-esteem. It also leads to a lot more, I think a lot of the bullying that goes on in schools now, it's a lot worse than when I was in school. I had plenty of plaguing me all the way through. But I think it's harder for kids nowadays because there's the internet and there's cyberbullying. And a lot of the games they play aren't, they'll have the terms of service and they'll say no hate speech and all that, but do they enforce it? A lot of these companies just don't want to hire the amount of customer service people to monitor how players are interacting with each other, and you have a lot of bullying that goes on in video games. I play video games, so I know, I see it. It's terrible. So, I think that schools need to have partnerships with psychologists, really, clinical people who hang their shingles out. They should provide access to mental health care in schools so that kids who are being bullied can have some place to talk about it and to work it out. They need not to be so obsessed with schedules. I know that they need to get kids from class to class and have them ready to learn, but how can a kid have a normal, calm environment when they take away their recesses and they give them 5 minutes between classes to run to their locker, get their books out, maybe go to the bathroom, and be in class on time? It's a lot of stress to put on a young kid. And yeah, they're going to have stress in the workplace, but not like that. I have had something like 27, 28 jobs. Okay. I've never had stress in the workplace like I had in middle school. And at work, I had at least 30 minutes for lunch. I had 2 15-minute breaks. I had a lot of social contact with my coworkers, and I got the work done. And, I pretty much got excellent marks on my evaluations. The one area I was deficient in was attendance. But as far as my work quality, I was an overachiever. And it showed in my evaluations. So, but kids are not adults. Their emotional development is not there. They're full of hormones, especially as teenagers, the 12 to 18 group. They're exploding with hormones. They are a powder keg ready to be set off as far as their emotions, especially girls, but boys too. And all these pressures on them. No wonder kids are overweight, and there's a rise in suicides. There's a rise in folks quitting school because they just can't handle it. So, instead of having these school psychologists who are specializing in experimental psychology, which is test giving, they need people in clinical psychology, therapy, to talk to kids and help them work through all these emotions and give them the tools they need as an adult to be able to be mentally healthy. So, and you've got a disability on top of all the normal stress in school, and you've got a poor kid who's a mess. So, really, school should be fun. Yes, they need to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and a few other subjects, but we need to make sure that we're preparing our kids for real life and work and college. And we're not doing a very good job of giving them the mental health tools they need. And especially our handicapped youth. We really need to have skills taught in the schools about how to cope with your disability, how to relate to people. They need to have inclusion so that kids are exposed to kids with disabilities, with obvious disabilities, and also exposed to kids with non-obvious disabilities so that they develop compassion. They need to have more anti-bullying in the schools. They need to make sure that there are no places that kids can corner other kids and threaten them or, you know, be mean to them. They need to have more social interaction so that they learn how to handle these situations. You really need to have the psychological professionals involved in school. And that's just my opinion, but I think it's valid. Especially, I saw what having disabilities did to my girls because their self-esteems just plummeted. It was very, very hard for them. Now, my younger one avoided a lot of that because when she left 4th grade, she was homeschooled, and then she decided to just get her GED and start college early, and she started college a year early at 17. I was very proud of her. She worked very hard for that. But, she never could find anybody to really socialize with because everybody wanted to go party, and she wasn't into that. For me and my daughter, a party is a slice of cake and some ice cream and some good music playing. That's a party. But drugs are so prevalent, and it's sad to see that a lot of young people turn to drugs because they can't cope. It's a symptom of a much bigger thing in my book. If I was running the public schools, I would not even start book learning until they were 10 years old. What do? We start them at preschool with numbers, colors, shapes, letters. We throw all this book learning at them, but we don't give them time to socialize. Any child psychologist will tell you that kids in pre-K and kindergarten, their number one thing that they need to accomplish is learning to get along with other kids. They need to be social. And the educational community seems to think that, they'll just get the social stuff. How? When you take recess away from them, you don't have supervised time where they can just talk to their peers and get silly and enjoy just being together. Instead, we've got to make them work every second because we've got people in the legislature who think, well, kids need to work. Well, they're working all the time. Are they paying attention to their kids? And these are the people who are making the laws. It's like, come on, you need to realize that kids need socialization, and they need it early. The optimum age for them to start really developing socially is about age 3. They're past this toddler stage. They're beginning to realize that there are other kids and other kids are fun. But about age 5 is when they start realizing, hey, people have feelings and you can hurt their feelings or you can hurt them physically. So it takes a lot of working with preschool kids to teach them that, hey, if you bite somebody, they are going to yell because it hurts. So you need to do a lot of work with young children, that young, to help them realize that they need to be nice to each other, that they need to learn to stand in line and not move out of line. They need to learn to listen to the teacher and do what she says, but they also need to listen to their peers. And if they're doing something that hurts somebody, they need to stop. And it needs to be taught with love and gently. I can remember when I was in 1st grade, and I was talkative and I loved everybody, and I was, just a social butterfly in school, and I wasn't getting my work done. And my teacher's answer was to take me in a closet, pull my pants down, and blister my behind with a bolo bat. Now, I don't know if you know what a bolo bat is. If you're my age, you remember these things. It was a wooden paddle with a little rubber ball attached, and you went boing, boing, boing. They would take the rubber ball and rubber string off, and the take the staple out, and they would use that. Corporal punishment is horrible. Even though they outlawed corporal punishment in school a long time ago, at least in Georgia, up until my junior high school years, I would still see kids getting paddled, usually boys. And it was horrifying. You know, they'd make them straddle the wall and lean up against the wall, and they would go like they're going for a home run, you know, with that paddle. And boom. And it's like, you know, I think about that now and I think, how many of those kids got back problems from that kind of paddling? It wasn't just paddling, you know, I mean, I really don't think you should be using a wooden board to hit a person's bottom. That would be so painful. You know, I remember getting hit with that bolo bat and I cried. And I came home crying to Mama about it because hours later I was still crying about it. And she was furious. She was an ER nurse. She knew what the consequences could be of something like that. So she went up there and she was not happy. Not happy at all. I don't think I was ever paddled again because of that. And, you know, my teacher was a lot kinder to me and I paid more attention in class. So definitely it wasn't the punishment that made my behavior change. It was the kindness because she was afraid that Mama was going to get a lawyer. But, you know, some of the methods teachers use in school are very harmful to children. You know, the common thing is if somebody does something wrong and the teacher's not sure who did it, they say, all right, we are going to have this punishment until somebody speaks up. What kid is going to rat on their friends? I mean, really. They are going to get all kinds of social repercussions if they speak up. So nobody speaks up, the whole class takes the punishment, and kids have a very sharp sense of what's fair and what's not. And that is totally not fair, and no child psychologist would recommend such a method. There are a lot better ways to handle it. You know, you can just keep on teaching. Now, I've never been a teacher, but I have been a substitute teacher. And I had young people in middle school cussing me, telling me I was just a substitute and they weren't going to mind me and this sort of thing. I learned how to do something called writing a citation. And I did write a lot of those. They learned that if they were in my class, they were not going to pull that stuff. But at the same time, I tried to be kind. I tried to listen to them. I was not going to punish the whole class and make somebody give me a name. I didn't do that, and they noticed. You know, if you treat kids like the aides they are, instead of treating them like a slave and something without feelings that can just go all day long. You know, if you listen to their feelings and you talk about your feelings, it's a lot healthier environment in a classroom. And especially, I always thought it was important to teach them coping skills. You don't know who might be disabled in a classroom because not all disabilities show. And so if you show a little kindness and listen to kids. Listening is the most important skill that a teacher can have. If you listen to your students, you're going to learn a lot more than if you're just going to get up there, be authoritarian, and tell them, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It's good to make the rules known, but at the same time, you can do it in a way that is kind. And kids respond to kindness. They get very little of it from teachers. I mean, there are a lot of good teachers, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-teacher. But some teachers go in there like they're just gonna, attack first before they're even attacked. And I had a lot of teachers like that. The poor things were just burned out. But nobody teaches a teacher how to really do teaching in a way that's gonna be beneficial to the student. I mean, they may have workshops on that sort of thing, but I saw teachers being taught when one of the jobs I got at Georgia State University before I got into the library was as a secretary in the education department. And I saw a lot of the teachers who were the professors who were doing the teaching of teachers. So I talked to a lot of them about, well, how do you handle this and how do you handle that? And they were very eager to answer my questions. And they were doing a lot of good things. A teacher does learn a lot of good things during their practicums. But there were a lot of things that I was hearing and it was like, like the punish everybody if somebody gets out of line thing. That never works. So, there's a lot that could be, if you've got a partnership between the psychology department and the education department in colleges, you would have a lot better quality education for the teachers who are teaching our children. And children are precious. They need to have the best start in life because life is often going to be very hard for them. So my big plan for public school would be to take everybody 3rd grade and under and put them into social situations, supervised social situations. Let them talk to each other, let them get in groups and do fun activities like coloring and maybe writing groups, and just, split them up into groups according to interest and just let them socialize. Because the social element is so important and so neglected in our public schools. Kids need to learn how to resolve conflicts peacefully so that they're not using their fists, so that they're not bringing guns to school, for Pete's sakes. We need to be teaching them conflict resolution, but at a kid's level. And there are a lot of studies that have shown that the best age to start school is age 10. Now, you've got moms that need to go to work, and so you need schools to start earlier. But if the emphasis was, you could have some learning in there, but, make it informal. Kids are little sponges. They will absorb things. If you have educational materials around, believe me, they will learn more than you ever thought possible. But if you concentrate on the social aspect, on talking to each other, working things out, communicating honestly, that would go so far towards when they start with the work in 4th grade. They already have a lot of tools and, be able to work out differences with their friends so that they're not having arguments in the middle of class when the teacher's trying to teach. and then put more teachers on 4th, 5th, and 6th grades so that you have enough people to answer questions. And, I wish they would reduce class sizes and hire more teachers, because we need for our good teachers not to get burned out. And a lot of them do. A lot of them just quit. They say, I can't handle this anymore, and they're out. And maybe they would have been great teachers if they had just had the support that they needed. We need to have more paraprofessionals in the classroom so that things that the teacher is um, keeping track of everything, and maybe you've got some teacher's aides in there just to answer questions that they can answer, and maybe some other people who aren't teacher's aides, but they're just there to sit and listen to people read, things that I did as a volunteer in schools. I had to quit that because I was really catching more things and being out of work more. But for a few months, I was using my day off to come in. I came in the last hour on Friday. So I got to see the entire week's worth of volunteer hours. And it was shocking. So many people were scheduled, and very few of them showed up for their hours that they volunteered for. You know, Reagan had this idea of volunteerism. Oh, you just have volunteers come in the schools. You don't need to hire teachers' aides. It does not work. I was a Girl Scout leader for 5 years, and I had a couple of parents that were willing to do things for me. I had a lot of parents who used me for babysitting, and they did not want to be involved with the troop. They did not want to do anything with their little girls in the troop. They just wanted to drop them off and pick them up and not do anything. It was very rough, because when you're doing a Girl Scout troop, you've got a bank account, you've got to have that kept track of and balanced. You've got to decide with the girls, how do you want to spend your money? If you sell Girl Scout cookies and you get money for that, then then you can decide with the troop, well, how do you want to spend your money? It teaches kids to handle money. It teaches them that money is a finite thing. You've got so much. You divide out work on researching how much will this cost, how much will that cost, and they can make intelligent decisions on their troop money. This is a core thing in Girl Scouts, that you have the cookie program. Part of that cookie money goes to the Girl Scout camps and to program stuff. And then the most of it comes back to the troop, so that you can sit down with your girls and brainstorm, well, what are we going to do with all this money? And, maybe they're coming out with things like, let's go to Disney World, or let's travel to Europe. And you let them come up with all these crazy ideas, and then you start teaching them about, well, we have so much money, we're not going to be able to go to Europe on this, or maybe we will. I mean, it depends on how hard the girls work and how much money comes back. I mean, there have been troops that got to go to Europe, so it's not outside the realm of possibility, but most troops are going to have $100 or $2, and so they can figure out, well, we could take a field trip to Six Flags, or we could, whatever, depending on how many girls are in the troop. If you've got 5 girls in the troop, then you can do a lot more than if you have 16 girls in the troop. But you basically let them decide, because they did the hard work. They decide how they're going to spend the money. You just don't let them come up with something that's really way out there. But usually when you explain to them, going to Europe is a little unrealistic because just plane tickets for all y'all would be so and so, and you've got to pay for your parents to go with you. So, yeah, you're going to have some expenses there. So, then you get them thinking about, well, what's something we could do locally? We could go to a museum, or, you go by what the girls' interests are. So you put out some ideas and you let them pick what they want to do or come out with something out of left field. Sometimes that's the best ideas, is something that one of the girls comes up with that nobody thought of. But organizations like that help kids to see potential where they didn't see it before, and it's beautiful to watch that unfold. Schools should be more like that, to let students have some decisions, let them earn some privileges, because there was a private school in Atlanta called the Children's School. And I got to visit over there. I was checking about a scholarship for my daughter, and unfortunately, I didn't qualify, so she didn't get to go. But I got to tour the school. I got to see how it was actually a student run school. And you would think, oh my gosh, that would be chaos. It would, no, it was very orderly. They had a court that they would try people that did offenses, and they were very strict. It was amazing. But they had a lot stricter rules than most schools were having, public schools at the time. But they at the same time, students could appeal things, they could ask for exceptions, and they had, groups of students decide whether this was justified. And they had a lot of very creative things going on. They had their own TV news, they had their own radio station. I mean, they did a lot of things that were really, really cool. So, I think public school could take a leaf from that, and they could say, well, we need to have ground rules, but other than that, we could let students decide some things and maybe come up with some solutions that the teachers would never think of. So, kids are smart. Even the dumbest kid in the class is smart. They all have something that they know about, and they can share with the rest of the class. There's no such thing as a kid who is just dead weight in a classroom. That, it doesn't happen. Even if you've got somebody with severe handicaps, they can still teach, you know, what it's like to be disabled, and that life is a little harder for them. And kids respond to this and they want to help. If you had more inclusion, you would have less persecution of disabled people in school. Instead of having the special ed class, they should have extra personnel to bring special ed to the regular classroom. And you could have the normal kids participate, and it would benefit the child that's disabled because they get to be included in things. And whether or not they can do the normal things is not the point. The point is the social aspect. And so often schools ignore the social aspect. They think that by keeping kids too busy to get into fights, i.e., take away recess, give them 5 minutes between classes, They think that's going to improve the social aspect. It is not, because you just get more vicious attacks from bullies because nobody's needs are being met. We are social animals, and we sure have learned a lot about that from COVID and having to be in isolation. It's been hard on all of us, but it's been especially hard on our kids. We need to teach kids how to interact with severely disabled kids so that they can get that connection. If you've got contact with somebody every day, you're going to develop affection for them. You're not going to be as likely to poke fun at them or call them names or do the kinds of cruel things that kids who are separated from disabled kids, they don't really pick up on that. And, if a kid's needs are not being met, they're going to act out. Any child psychologist will tell you that. So I feel it's so important that we change our educational system so that we build in a lot of these experiences that will help kids, normal and disabled, all through their life. Because at some point, there was a very good argument for making all houses accessible. And the reason being, sometime in your life, you're going to get maybe a broken ankle or a knee problem or some sort of mobility problem. If you're a young mom and you have a toddler, you're going to be pushing a stroller, so that flat entryway would be very handy when you're trying to juggle a toddler and a stroller and groceries. Everybody needs to carry groceries in. If you've got a wide doorway, it makes it a lot easier to carry your packages in. So, and if you don't have to climb steps, it's a lot safer for somebody with their arms full to get in the door. So, disability modifications benefit everybody, because at some point, everybody is going to have maybe a mobility problem or maybe another problem, that just having these modifications in every new house would make it easier. Say if you're a young couple with kids and then you get an elderly parent come to live with you and that maybe they're in a wheelchair. You've already got the flat entry, you've already got the countertops that are different heights, you've already got the doorknobs. I mean, you're set. So, and you can add disability equipment if you need to. One good thing that I want to tell you about is there are charities that collect disability equipment and give it away for free. In Atlanta, there is FODAC, which is Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. Let me put a link to that. There's also the independent living centers, so let me do that first. Okay, let me look for Okay. Directory of Centers for Independent Living. Okay, here's a very good resource. Independent living. Okay, and here is the link. No matter where you live in the United States, there is a center for independent living, and they vary according to what services they offer, and they may be several counties away from you, but they're a good resource for disability equipment. First of all, they will come and inspect your home and tell you, okay, you might want to keep this walkway clear for your disabled person. You might need this kind of wheelchair. You might need this equipment. And some of them have equipment for loan that you never have to give back. You can just use it. So they might have shower chairs, they might have wheelchairs, they might have elbow crutches, they might have all sorts of different, you know, those bars for your tub that you just screw a little handle and you've got a handhold on the tub. Little things like this, no matter where you live, if you're renting, you can't do alterations to your place, but ramps, they might have small ramps available. There are also charities like Goodwill, Salvation Army, and a good one is, all right, Habitat for Humanity has the In Store. And a lot of times, if you tell them you're getting this for a handicapped person, they will give you a discount over their already 70% discount. um, all the builders will donate building supplies. They always have things left over. Sometimes it's things like ceiling fans and appliances, and maybe the client changes their mind. They don't like the color or they don't like the way it looks, and so the builder kind of eats the expense, and they will donate these things to the in stores. So let me give a link for that too. Let's see. Oh, the Restore. Okay. Alrighty. Here is the link. Alright, so this is the Habitat for Humanity Restore. And there is the link. And these may be in your community, and they have building supplies, small appliances, large appliances, doors, flooring, wood. They have all sorts of building materials that are left over when people build homes. So a lot of these, you're in competition with builders coming to get free supplies, or low cost supplies. So you may have to ask the store what day they get most of their stuff and be there early in the morning on that day to pick up stuff. But most of them have a good selection of used items as well that are donated. And this can be stuff like bookcases, dishes, all sorts of things. And they have those in the store all the time. So you can come through, and if you tell them that, if you're disabled, you can say, well, I'm disabled. Or if you're buying for somebody who is disabled, you can say, I'm getting this for a disabled person, and they might offer you the discount. I'm not sure if they ask for proof. The times that I've told them I'm a disabled person, they've given me the discount. No questions asked. So it's a very good source of if you're going to build something for a disabled person. Keep in mind, if you're going to build a ramp for a disabled person, there are specific things you've got to know in order to build one. You can't just build one with a good slope and say, well, that's it, because if the slope is too steep, it may work for a wheelchair if it's dry and clear weather, but if it's raining, the wheelchair might not make it up the ramp. So you want to look up the standards for building something for a disabled person to make sure that you're not building the slope too steep. The steepness has to be no more than 5 degrees. And so you have rise and you have how long the ramp needs to be to get that angle low. So there are instructions on the internet, so if you know to look for them. So especially if you're involved with a church group that builds ramps, you need to remind them that, hey, if it's too steep, it is nearly unusable for a handicapped person. So that's something to know and keep in mind. And also Goodwill, Salvation Army, all these thrift stores that have secondhand items, they have a lot more than clothes. Clothes are real easy to get. A lot of them have been raising their prices in the past few years, so it's almost getting too expensive for people at very low incomes. But that's where that handicap discount might come in. You know, it's worth a try especially if you're trying to buy clothes for a disabled person. You should tell them that these clothes are going for a handicapped child or a handicapped adult, and you know, you need to, if they're not there, then you know, it's kind of hit or miss whether they're going to fit. And particularly with disabled children, if they have deformities of some sort, then the clothes may not fit them as well, or you might have to put Velcro instead of zippers. So, you know, if you're good at sewing, you can alter these clothes. But if you aren't, then you might have to hire a seamstress to do it. But the basic thing is that, you know, it's better to measure the person you're going to get the stuff for so that you have exact measurements. You look up online to see what sizes that correlates to, and just, you know, if they've got, you know, if there are some measurements that are a lot bigger than other measurements, you want to go with the bigger size. And maybe consider they might need a belt for the pants, or they might need not to have pants to have a dress if they're female. So you need to definitely keep their preferences in mind. What are their favorite colors, you know? Because if they can't be there, it's the optimum thing is for them to be there with you, shopping with you. But in this time of COVID, it's very difficult. You know, you don't want to risk them getting COVID or um, being exposed to the flu, colds, and all that. When, you know, if they catch a lot of things, it's not, you know, it might be better to just go and shop for them if you're not scared of getting something. But most of the studies about COVID-19 are saying that we don't have to be as worried about surfaces and disinfecting. I mean, yes, you need to disinfect, but you don't have to be as worried about picking up COVID-19 from doorknobs and touching things as much as you need to be worried about whether you're wearing a mask, and a good quality mask. You need tight woven cotton. The polyester ones and all that don't work as well. So definitely the thrift stores are probably pretty safe places to go, because if they're just taking the minimum cleanliness seriously, then as long as you're social distancing and you wear a mask and you're vaccinated, you're probably okay. So if you've got an idea of what kind of things your handicapped person needs, then you can go in there and look and just see what they have that day. And that's a good source of disability equipment. The optimum is to get new equipment from Medicare or Medicaid. And it's, kind of a process, but the first step is to ask the person's doctor for a prescription. And, you know, um, that's for, if it's a handicapped child, then the parents ought to talk to the doctor and say, I'm having trouble with this. If you think about activities of daily living, bathing, toileting, just safety in the home and stuff. So you can have that discussion with the doctor about your child and say, you know, is there some bit of disability equipment that could make this easier? Because, you can have a shower chair in the bathtub and a handheld shower with a hose on it, and that makes bathing so much easier. And the hose with the shower head, those, you just unscrew the shower head and screw this thing on. It's easy as pie. You don't have to get a plumber. So even I can do that. So it's not hard to install some of these things. The shower chair, you just sit in the tub. You may have a little trouble building the thing, but they come with instructions. Usually if you get them in a secondhand store or whatever, they're going to be put together. So you want to make sure, if you're getting secondhand disability equipment, you want to look up that particular piece of equipment. If it still has the serial number on it, you want to look it up and make sure it hasn't had a recall on it. You want to make sure that it's the appropriate size for the person. If you've got a big person, you might consider a bariatric kind of wheelchair or shower chair. It's got to be able to hold their weight. If they're itty bitty, you've got to make sure that everything is small enough so that they can sit on it safely. So you also want to make sure that, if they can't sit up, then you need some way of strapping them in so that they don't slip out and fall and get hurt. So there's a lot to consider there, but especially for people my age, a raised toilet seat is a godsend. It is wonderful because I've got one that has a seat on it. It sits over the toilet, and it's got handles, so I can hold on to the handles, lowering myself and getting up. And it's a lot harder to get up than it is to get down there. So having those handles to hold on to really makes the difference between me being able to go to the toilet by myself or not. So things like this can help tremendously. And if you've got a child with a disability, if you've got to lift them onto the toilet seat, maybe there is a kind of toilet seat that makes that a little easier. So definitely disability equipment can make it so much easier to care for the person. And so check out the charities in your area and see, if you get a piece of disability equipment secondhand, you want to make sure that all the screws are tight, that, you know, it's cleaned thoroughly, because, they're going to clean it, right? But you probably want to disinfect it again before your person uses it, because you don't know who's been touching it in the store, and maybe they got rushed and they didn't do the disinfecting that day, or hadn't done it yet. It's just better to just take the precaution and just wipe it down with some alcohol wipes, or you can put alcohol on a washcloth and wipe it down, very simple cleaning it. Or you can just use bleach spray. Bleach spray is wonderful. So you can just spray it down and get the shower head and just rinse it off in the tub. Easy. So you just want to make sure there's no gross dirt stuck in between the stuff, anywhere that a person might put a finger. If there's a fingernail, they might, you don't want to have any gross yuck on the little places that are hard to get to, because if you're handicapped, you will find them. But there are so many things that can make life easier. And, it's best to start that conversation with the person's doctor. But definitely, if there are pieces of equipment that you need, and maybe you get turned down at Medicaid and you don't know where to get it, do an internet search for, secondhand stores near me, and, maybe even for disability equipment. And don't forget the independent living centers, like the link that I gave you for iru.org. That's the agency under which independent living centers fall. So they have a map and they show you where the independent living centers are. If you give a call to the independent living center, they can often point you at these charities that give away disability equipment. So that way you can get the disability equipment your loved one needs, for free or for cheap. So definitely it's worth talking to somebody over there. The nice thing about the independent living centers is they are staffed by people with handicaps. So they understand people with handicaps. It's really nice that they have that, and it's a government function. There's also, if you've got somebody with vision impairment, they can set them up with a computer that can talk to them. They can set them up with things like the talking clocks, talking watches, things like that. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff available through most states. So the Independent Living Center is your key to all this information about how you can get the help that your loved one needs. So, if they're blind, they can get a service dog. And often that relationship with the service dog is very mentally healthy for them. Because it's hard to deal with having a disability if you're missing a sense that everybody else has. It's got to mess with your head. So, it's good to find out what resources are available for deaf people. There's a lot of controversy over sign language versus being able to read lips, and that's a decision that parents and children have to just get all the information they can and just make the best decision they can. Personally, I think it would be better to learn both. because there's a whole community around deaf people. I mean, you get two deaf people together and they're using sign language, and having learned a little bit of sign language and having supervised two deaf girls, I had a little window into deaf culture. And one of them didn't want to talk to me much. She was born deaf, and she just didn't want to bother teaching me sign language, or, I get that. I get that. The other lady I supervised was near my age, and she had lost her hearing later in life. So she was willing to explain to me what deaf culture was like and things like that. It's a whole neat culture. And there are things you can express in sign language that you actually can't in speech. So, it's really neat. So, someone with a child with a hearing disability has a lot of choices and a lot of learning to do about, what they want for their child and what different methods there are for learning various things, the lip reading versus signs. And personally, I think they should teach both to everybody, because the signing is part of deaf culture. It's kind of unnatural to expect a deaf person to only lip read and not and try to speak. And it's a very difficult skill to pick up, to be able to speak when you're deaf. So some people can speak understandably and some can't. So you've got signing to fall back on that, just about everybody can do. Um, I even, since I had some sign language learning, I taught my babies sign language before they were able to speak. Just a little bit, just simple things, at that level, about eat and drink is about all that they're going to, but they can say yes and no. And it amazed me at how early they could pick up the sign language when they were not speaking yet, and it helped them to express their needs. So, you know, um, with every disability, there's a learning curve. Not everybody has the same disabilities, and so there's a lot of room for understanding. If you're not disabled and you are learning about a loved one's disability, it may be overwhelming to learn all these things, and there may be grief and sadness that they're not going to be able to do some of the things that you can do. But what I tell everybody is, you've got the can list and you've got the can't list. And you should always pay more attention to your can list and not worry so much about trying to be able to do the can't list. You know, can and can't may be a gray area. It might be with physical therapy, you can move some things from the can't list over to the can list. Or you may have, in my age, I seem to be accumulating disabilities. So in some places, I'm having to move things from my can list to my can't list, and it drives me crazy. I don't like it. But there's always stuff on your can list. And if you concentrate more on enjoying what you can do, then you'll be less unhappy about what you can't do. There's always going to be that grief about the things that you can't do, or maybe you can't do them anymore, or you never could do them and you see people doing it and you wish you could be normal. That's part of the disability picture. Everybody wants to be normal and just treated like a normal human being. But when you have disabilities, you can't be totally normal, but you can simulate normal in a way that feels good to you. And that's what you want. You want people to understand that you may have good days and bad days. There are some disabilities that you don't have good and bad days. You just, if you're blind, then and you can't see at all, then you are blind no matter what day it is, but in the case of me with fibromyalgia, I have some days that are so painful I can hardly lift my head, and I have other days that I feel like getting up and walking a little bit. So my function will vary from day to day, and there's not a problem with being, not able to do something one day and being able to do it the next. It doesn't mean you're disabled. You're not disabled. It doesn't mean you're not disabled. And if your disability is steady and it's always the same, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's easier to adapt when your disability is a constant thing, I'm sure, but it's good to accept all disabilities and to accept what the person feels he or she can do. Because on one hand, in physical therapy, you have to do some things that are very uncomfortable in order to gain function. And, you have to kind of push through some things. But you don't want to get so accepting of disability that when you get sick, maybe you don't go to the doctor because you're like, it's my disability again. And then you maybe have something life-threatening. So it's easy to ignore your body when you are constantly having to ignore your body because you just have to get through each day mentally. So you have to have a happy medium. And it's good to have people around you who can say, this is not normal. You need to go to the doctor. And it's also good to keep in mind that when you go to the doctor, there may be some extra anxiety because what if he doesn't believe me? Because if you're disabled, you probably had a lot of doctors that haven't listened to you because they just haven't understood how bad it is because we are so good at hiding to appear normal. And that's just the normal psychological thing that we try to hide what is wrong with us because we just don't want to have something wrong with us again, So we need to be aware of that. If you're taking care of a disabled person, you need to kind of talk to them before that doctor's visit and say, are you being honest with yourself? Or you're thinking this is normal and I'm seeing this and it's not normal. So, let's talk about, you need to be honest with the doctor. And it's so easy to fall into that habit of just saying, oh, everything's fine. Yeah. When it's not fine, it can be bad. I remember 2 years ago, I had a stomach problem. I was really having a lot of stomach pain, and at one point I was like, maybe I should call an ambulance. And I was living alone at the time. And I finally called a nurse and described my symptoms. She says, you need to come up here. So, I went and, I made an appointment with my doctor and I went. And she was concerned, but maybe not concerned enough to do a CT scan, and I said, would you please do the CT scan just for my peace of mind? And she says, yeah, sure. Well, I went in for the CT scan, and then the tech was saying, well, I'll send these results out and your doctor will call you. And I said, could you call the doctor now just for my peace of mind? So she said, okay, I'll call her. Next thing I know, she comes back in and she says, would you follow me to the emergency room? I'm in my power chair. So I followed her, and I ended up being admitted for emergency surgery for a bowel obstruction. My bowel had actually twisted, and usually that is excruciatingly painful, but apparently when it twisted, it killed some of the nerves. So I had that severe pain for maybe an hour, and it went away, and I thought I was okay. I wasn't. And they had to take out all my redundant colon. I had never had bowel problems before, you know, other than, occasional normal stuff. But I mean, nothing that I had to go to the hospital with. It was shocking. So, you don't want to ignore things when maybe there is something going on. I mean, I've gone to the doctor other times and it's turned out to be just my disabilities. There was one time when I was having horrible chest pains, and I went to the doctor, and it turned out to be my stomach acting up. It mimicked a heart attack. I was scared to death. It turned out to be nothing. Then I was less likely to mention stuff the next time I went in, because it's up and down when you have disabilities. So you don't want to ignore things, and it's better to go to the hospital and not have anything serious going on than it is to almost not have a test and turn out that, if I hadn't gone in for that emergency surgery, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. So it was dead serious. So, you want to listen to your handicapped people that you're close to. Encourage them to go see the doctor. And of course, if you don't have health insurance and you're worried about how you're going to pay for it, then yeah, a lot of people are not going to the doctor and they're paying the ultimate price for it. I really believe in universal health care. We are the only industrialized country that does not have universal health care, and it shows. We have rich people with excellent care, and poor people, it's hit or miss whether you're going to live or die. It is not fair. And I think we handicapped people who tend to be lower income, we need to have a voice. We need to be listened to in Congress, and they need to pass this legislation so that we can get health care. And the price of health care will come down. We are also the most expensive country for health care. So, if we have universal health care, we will catch major problems while they are minor, and it will cost less to treat us. So therefore, healthcare as a whole, the price structure will come down because people will be getting well care, and they won't be showing up at the emergency room with end-stage cancer. They won't be showing up at the emergency room with pneumonia that could have been just treated with antibiotics earlier, and they wouldn't be in the hospital in the first place. It's always less expensive to treat somebody, and I have kitties. it's always less expensive to treat these small problems because before they blow up and become huge. So, it's not as expensive as the opponents of universal health care would have you think. I've talked to a person in Canada who has universal health care, and he was saying it's a fair system. And yeah, we do have to pay into it, and I don't like the prices that we have to pay. But on the other hand, the prices of healthcare have come down since we adopted this system, and I like that because I don't have to pay as many taxes. So, I've talked to people. I have a friend in Italy, and she says that, if she is too ill to go to the doctor, she has a doctor who can come to her house. I remember house calls. I miss them because through the 60s, we had a doctor who would make house calls. He would come and see Mama, and she wouldn't have to go to the doctor's office and sit and be exposed to everything else. And when that changed and she couldn't get visits from him anymore, he got too old to practice and he retired. None of the other doctors were doing home visits. So it was a great hardship on her, very hard on her. She had all sorts of health problems. And the poor thing died of pneumonia at 59. That is so young. So, if she could have gotten care at home, maybe she would have lasted a few more years. All those times of getting pneumonia added up. Every time you get pneumonia, you've got scars on your lung, and pretty soon you've got scars on your scars, and what do you breathe with? So, definitely a serious problem. Less people would be getting pneumonia if they got the care they needed to treat them with antibiotics before it got to the pneumonia stage. So I've been rambling on, and here it is 10:55, so I think I'm going to end the live stream. But I sure have enjoyed it. Thank you, Muzzy50, for following me, and thank you for being in the conversation, and I hope I said something useful. To all of you out there, if you are a praying sort, please pray for my sister and brother-in-law in the hospital. They both have COVID pneumonia, and we are hoping that they will get better soon, but it's serious stuff, so I'm very worried. So, if you want to pray or send good vibes, all of it we would be very grateful for it. And I'm going to go ahead and stop streaming now, and I'm like an hour beyond what I would have been. But I really did enjoy being with y'all tonight, and I'm hoping that maybe the links I shared will be useful to somebody watching the video later on YouTube. It will be on the Dana Stories account, so help yourself, and I hope that you have a pleasant evening. Y'all take care. Remember, enjoy what you can do, and don't stress about the stuff that you can't do. There's always hope that maybe some of those can'ts will become cans, but don't put off your happiness until you're able to do something. It's more important to enjoy life every second, and I do. And it gets hard sometimes, but you've got to keep the positive attitude. Pain is less when you have a positive attitude, and disability doesn't quite hit you so hard when you find things to enjoy all during your day. So appreciate the small things and take care. I love y'all, and I hope to talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Good night.